Welcome to Friendeavor, the podcast, the weekly podcast where we explore the highs and lows of friendship with your hosts, Danielle and Kayla.
As we journey through life, our friendships often evolve and change, ebb and flow, and sometimes even come to an end. Danielle and I are lifelong advocates for the power of friendship, and we are here to guide all of us through the many challenges and joys that come with building and maintaining strong, meaningful connections with those around us.
Join us each week as we deep dive into the intricacies of friendship, from navigating conflicts to fostering new relationships and everything in between. With insightful interviews, personal anecdotes, and expert advice, Friendeavor is the perfect podcast for anyone looking to strengthen their bonds with the people they love.
So, whether you are on the go, taking care of chores, or just settling in, get ready to explore the world of friendship on Friendeavor, the podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Friendeavor, the podcast. My name is Danielle.
And I'm Kayla. Hey.
And we are thrilled to be introducing episode 11 to you guys. This week we are talking about loyalty and what it means for friendship. Hey guys, it's Danielle here with a side note. You may think to yourself, wow, this audio quality doesn't seem great. Well, that would be because I forgot to plug in my microphone and I was talking into it the whole time, but it was actually recording on my computer. So I'm sorry about that, but I hope you enjoy the episode anyways. This concludes our side note. Now back to the episode. It might be a little bit of a unique take the way we are attacking this, and we're going to come right out and say, up front that this might not be your typical what you think of a loyalty. That's what we should be listening to, right? Things that maybe not challenge our perspective, but give us a different view. And really what I want to say is that we're not going into it talking about the benefits of loyalty. We're talking about what it is and how it should affect you and how you should not let it affect you. So it's a multifaceted, and we're going to do our best to be fair and to be honest and to be reasonable, but really we want to attack it from all sides to give you a full and complete view of this.
People's actions can be harmful, but they do it all under this umbrella of loyalty. And there's a lot to dig into here. So super excited. Yeah.
All right, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about the good stuff. Loyalty and friendship goes beyond just good times and good vibes. It's more so about being there through thick and thin. And if I can draw your attention to the parable of the prodigal son really quickly. The prodigal son leaves his father's house. He goes out and makes friends. He takes his father's inheritance. And when he loses all of his money, how it's portrayed, obviously, in like Sunday school and children's church, stuff like that, is that his friends are all partiers. And then when he loses all his money, they're no longer there for them. So that is a very good illustration of it. It's so much more than just being there in the good times. You also need to be there through thick and thin. So loyalty means being supportive, even when it's not convenient for you to be supportive. That doesn't mean you have to excuse everything that they do. And it really doesn't mean that you have to be 100% unwavering in your loyalty. I mean, it's healthy. It's a good boundary. And if you don't, I highly recommend you seek counsel because, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to get into all of that later. But basically what I'm saying is that even when it's not convenient for you to be there for someone, and whatever convenience means to you, maybe you have to go get them from the airport in the middle of the night, or maybe you have to watch their kids while they're going through, family therapy with their husband or something like that. Even if it's not something that you would enjoy doing, being there for someone and being loyal to them is more than just a convenience when the time is right.
Right. And really being loyal means having someone's best interest in mind. So it's not supporting their every decision or their every action. It's being willing to speak up when you see that something could be potentially harmful for them or something wasn't right.
Yeah. And that loyalty aspect is providing a safe space for when they're coming out of a difficult thing that, you didn't approve of them. So a lot of times we hear like, I support you, but I don't agree with you, that kind of thing. That's not really what loyalty is. It's not being supportive, even if it goes against your moral compass or your belief system, right? It's about being there for them when they find themselves and when it's time to come home. Just like the father of the prodigal was there for his son. He did not go out and live that raucous lifestyle with him when he was out there.
Right.
And again, I'm laughing because we're jumping ahead into what loyalty isn't, and it's gonna be so layered in this episode. So I'm sorry if it seems like we're jumping around, but we want to make sure, like I said at the beginning, that we cover every aspect because we don't want it to be uh an enigma, confusion by the end of this. We want you guys to have a full, or at least a better understanding of what loyalty is and what it is not. So if someone is out there living a life that is destructive or unhealthy, loyalty does not mean going and feeding that destructive lifestyle with your support. It means providing a safe space for them when it's time for them to come out. Or if they need guidance, loyalty is it's being there for them in a healthy way to help them, and not in turn to affect yourself and your soul and your life and other people who are dependent on you. And like we mentioned in pretty much every episode, because it's such a huge factor in friendship, is that trust is a crucial component to the loyalty of friendship. If someone is worried that you're going to turn around and stab them in the back every time they're out of your presence, guess what? You do not have loyalty in your friendship. And if they have to be worried about you talking about them or sharing intimate details about their life with someone else, that's not loyalty. And that's more of your traditional view of loyalty. So you got to have a trust element betwixt your friends, if I may use that word, in order to have the bond that loyalty brings to friendship. Challenges to loyalty can include friends making harmful choices or conflicts with each other. If you're in a friend group, and I know we use that term a lot, and so it's not as black and white as like, okay, I have a friend group, whereas these people are just best friends. It ebbs, it flows. You got seasons of life, you got different people in your friendship pyramid. I'm talking about the core group that you actively choose to spend most of your time with. Okay, if two of your friends are going at it and are struggling in their friendship, that does not mean loyalty is choosing one or the other. Being loyal to both of them is actively pursuing a resolution that keeps your friend group together and healthy and strong, and building those foundations that will lead to a long lasting, hopefully lifelong connectivity and friendship with those people.
Also, communication and empathy and forgiveness, those are all essential strategies for nurturing loyalty with, one-on-one friends or in a group aspect. And if that's something that you have a hard time doing, so granting forgiveness, asking forgiveness, showing empathy, then it may be time to re-examine your loyalties.
Mm-hmm. And I know therapy is primarily aimed at couples and families and individuals and that kind of thing. And I'm not saying that your friend group needs to go and seek professional counseling, but the strategies that are used in those kind of sessions could be activated to help your group like navigate issues where loyalty could be a problem. Okay, what if one friend is doubting another friend's loyalty to the friend group? Again, what does loyalty mean? It means trust, confidence, understanding that they have your best interests at heart. And we're going to dive way more into what loyalty isn't here in a few minutes. But loyalty is, let's talk about loyalty, is celebrating each other's successes, being there for each other in inconvenient times, like we talked about. Genuine appreciation for the people in your life and not expecting an excessive amount from them. Loyalty is so much more than stabbing someone in the back with gossip or whatever, because that's typically what it's viewed as. There is genuine loyal friendships are frankly invaluable treasures that should be cherished, but sometimes it's easier to understand a concept if you know what it isn't rather than if you know what it is. So we're going to dive into around 10-ish, which more might crop up as we're talking about it, but instances of what loyalty is not. So if you would bear with us, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back to talk about what loyalty is often misconstrued as. Welcome back, everybody. We are now diving into what loyalty is not. or what it is misconstrued as. And I'm a teacher, so I often admonish my kids to take notes. And this is a podcast, so obviously you can go back and listen to it anytime you want, or you might not even take what we say seriously enough to pack it away. But if you are someone who needs a visual representation of what you hear, now might be a good time to take out a notebook, even if you just write these down to make yourself a graphic organizer to see how it affects you, how it doesn't, or you might recognize a pattern in your life of something that loyalty is misconstrued as for you or for someone else in your life. And I think that would help you navigate getting out of that situation or getting through that situation. So that's just my little teacher plug to take some notes, and hopefully this will be a support.
And if you do recognize some of those patterns, you don't need to fret that you have, oh my word, my friends are terrible, they're not loyal to me. But it does maybe merit a conversation.
Yeah.
And still take notes if you're not recognizing these patterns, because they may come up in the future.
Yeah, because I am a firm believer in, I mean, not every single thing needs to be aired out, but if you can head something off now, it would be much easier to navigate in the future. You don't need to go air out conflict, especially if it's not your own conflict, if it's someone else's conflict. You don't need to go air it out every single time. But if it's a big enough situation that it affects you or affects your spirituality, and it's if you're unable to forgive someone for one of these instances, recognizing it can only be a help at this stage. So we're not trying to tell you how to live your life, but we are Friendeavor the podcast, and you tuned in for a reason. So let's go. Number 1, loyalty is often misconstrued as blind support. We touched on this a little bit in earlier because I couldn't help myself. I was jumping all around, but some individuals may mistakenly believe that loyalty means unquestioningly supporting a friend or loved one, even when they're engaging in harmful, destructive, or even like unethical behavior. This is enabling. This is enabling that destructive behavior rather than helping them. So you're not just saying like, go live your life, I approve of it and I'm support you. No, you be there for them. But loyalty is not going to help that person make better choices by saying, I support you 100%. That's blind support.
Right.
And loyalty is often misconstrued as that, particularly, and I don't want to step out of my scope of range here, but in parents, because you got that, unconditional support. But blind support is not enabling someone in their bad choices or their destructive life habits. It's just not what it is.
Right. I actually know of a story where a man that was previously addicted to drugs actually got re-addicted during COVID. He was clean for several years, got addicted again during COVID, and lived in a different state than all of his family. But recently, like in the past year or so, his loyal sister, flew out and searched the area that he was in, the city that he was in, on foot, and just asking other homeless people, have you seen this guy? He was avoiding contact with her because just drugs messing with your brain. But she eventually found him and flew him all the way back home, got him through rehab, paid for it. And today he is I think over 100 days clean.
Wow.
And yeah, he's going to a church, and it's just so awesome to see that loyalty played out in that way.
True loyalty.
Yeah. It was not easy. And he's a grown adult, and she could have just been like, hey, you're making your choices, you're reaping what you're sowing.
Right.
But yeah. So that is a moving story of loyalty for me.
Yeah. I mean, she was loyal to him, not to his decisions, right? She was loyal as a person who cared about him and wanted him to get his life together. If she used blind support loyalty, which is often a mistaken form of loyalty, she could have been like, oh, he's living his truth, he's living the life he wants to live, I'm going to support him in his drug addiction. living his truth, no, that is blind support. That is ridiculous. That is not actual loyalty. So blind support,
Right.
listener, is not what loyalty is. Which leads us to our second listing of what loyalty is not, is misplaced loyalty. Sometimes you might feel loyalty toward a person or a group that does not reciprocate that loyalty or does not have your best interest at heart. This can lead to a very one-sided or unhealthy relationship that's not balanced. I often think of people who give their life. If I can pull in a story that I also heard, an employee worked at a company for several years. I heard this on the internet, so true or not true, take it as you will, but it's a good lesson. And they worked for several years and they passed away unexpectedly. And the next day, when the company found out, they cleaned out the desk and put up a job listing for that person's job, because that's what it was. It was a position that needed filling. If that person had let their entire life, and I don't know that person, I don't know what their life was, but using that as an example, if that person had let their entire life be surrounded by their career, the second they were gone, that spot needed filling. And that company did not have, did not hurt for that person, did not long for them to return, was not grieved by their passing. I mean, their coworkers may have, but the corporation that they were loyal to did not. So they spent their time, or it's possible to misplace your loyalty for a company or a group or whatever that in turn does not reciprocate for you. You hear about people in bad relationships where the girlfriend is so obsessed with her boyfriend, and she's so loyal to him, and she's blinded by her feelings of love, that she doesn't care that he doesn't reciprocate that same loyalty to her. Okay, and so she ends up in an abusive relationship because she misplaced her loyalty.
Right.
And what kind of life is that to live, that you've put it in the wrong thing? Like, loyalty needs to be placed in heartfelt, balanced relationships where someone cares about you in return.
Yeah, it's got to be reciprocal.
Yeah.
And it can change depending on, if it's a work relationship where they're your superiors versus a friendship, the level of reciprocity is going to be, or what reciprocity looks like is going to be different.
Right.
But as a general rule of thumb for friendships, it's got to be reciprocal loyalty.
I'm really glad that you brought up that, because they need to prove, if you're going to pour so much love and attention into a relationship with someone, or not necessarily even a romantic relationship, like a mentorship or anything like that, they need to prove that they care about you just as much in return, or else therefore it is misplaced. I mean, it's kind of hard to say that's just the black and white, there's no gray area there, but a good rule of thumb is that the give and take in any relationship, including ones that involve loyalty, which is pretty much any relationship, it needs to be proven, definable, point to that moment in history loyalty.
Right. And oftentimes, again, going back to that work situation where they're your superiors, they should show their loyalty to you in different ways. Now, you're going to show your loyalty to them probably, by working for them,
right?
Doing the things they need you to do. It's on your side, it's more of a doing relationship, but on their side, loyalty can look like, hey, I'm not going to ask you to do unreasonable things for an unreasonable price. I'm not going to ask you to do things last minute.
Yeah.
Setting healthy boundaries and respecting your personal life as well.
So. Yeah. The job thing resonates with me, not as someone who spends too much time on my job. Like, I work my 40 and I'm done. It's actually 35, but I have a person who's on my team at work. She's, a teacher that it's my grade subject team, who told me yesterday in a meeting, oh yeah, how do you guys find time to do all this stuff? I've had to start grading on the weekends. And I was like, I would rather die than grade a single paper on the weekends. Are you kidding me? Like, it makes me kind of sick that I have to podcast from the same desk that I work at, but like, I work at home, It's like, she is so loyal to this job that does not give her enough time. I mean, it could be
Right.
time management issues, but my
Yeah.
point is that she feels such pressure to perform for this job
Yeah.
that she will give up her time she's not being paid for. And let me tell you something, the company, my school, does not require that of her, but she feels a certain amount of loyalty to them that she's willing to do that, even though they don't expect that to. They ask us, please shut down your computers at 4. Take some time. Work-life balance is very important to the culture, but people are just
Hmm.
loyal to the cause and loyal to their students or whatever, misplaced, and we are spending a lot of time on this one, but it's super important. So
Hmm.
I just want to make sure we cover it. And so she is now spending what time she should be spending with her husband and children and life and for us, church and whatever. She's grading papers on a weekend. No stinking way will you ever see me do that. Yeah,
Oh.
so just got worked up over that one, and there's probably more that we'll get worked up over, but let's move into number 3. uh Fear of conflict. Kayla, why don't you walk us through that one?
Yeah. So some people, I would definitely say I lean more toward this category, might avoid addressing issues or conflicts with their friends because they think it's disloyal to bring up problems. I wouldn't say that this is the reason I do it. I'm very uncomfortable with confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
um, that is definitely something I struggle with. But the fact is, this can lead to unresolved issues and potentially damaging the relationship further because
Yeah.
all that stuff is going to get bottled up and then it's going to spill out.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I mean, my friend group, so tomorrow is actually 10 years for us. So
Oh,
at the time of us shooting this, I think we talked about this when we last recorded, but at the time of us shooting this, tomorrow is our 10 years. So, a month from now when this drops or whatever, it'll have been October. But um it was so 3 of us are very non-confrontational. And I wouldn't say that I'm very confrontational, but I'm just like, I'm not afraid of it. And so whenever
yeah.
something comes up, those 3 are like, sweep it under the rug, like pretend it wasn't there, whatever.
Hmm.
And we're all adults. I mean, we can navigate conflict, but in those few situations where it came up, it's like, bro, that got swept under the rug 2 years ago, but we're bringing it up because it never got dealt with, you know?
Mm,
Or someone made a joke about something that we didn't realize we were not supposed to make a joke about, but because we never addressed it, here we are later, it getting dealt with, or
yeah.
maybe not dealt with, but having to face it again. So fear of conflict can like, if you say, okay, I'm loyal to this person, so therefore I'm not going to bring up what bothers me or whatever, that's not loyalty.
Mhm.
That's not best interests
Yeah.
for you or the other person or the friend group or whatever.
Hmm.
If you avoid addressing those issues, people don't often think of this as loyalty, but that's what loyalty is not, right? Loyalty is
Right.
not
Yeah.
ignoring situations for the temporary relief of like, okay, we don't have to deal with that anymore.
Right. Also, revisiting what you said about you being more of an addresser friend in your friend group.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Oftentimes you can see the addresser friend being so adamant about addressing things and getting it on the table that they might go and try to fix the
Mm-hmm.
avoider friend's problems for them
Yeah.
under this under the umbrella of loyalty.
Oh yeah.
And that's also what loyalty is not, because
Mm-hmm.
disregarding your friend's wishes is not loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely. I remember a situation a couple years ago where one of my friends was in a conflict with someone else, and I wanted to go take care of it for them. I wanted to do that because they weren't doing it for themselves. And so, I was getting worked up, and I was like, oh, and not only like logistically could I not have done it, it was also my place, but man, I wanted to so bad, but that wasn't my
yeah,
place. And so,
no,
out of my literal loyalty to her, I stayed out of it because that was what was best
right,
for her. It
yeah,
didn't feel like what was best for me, but it really had nothing to do with me. But by golly, I wanted to take care of that for
yeah.
her.
Because to you, it might feel like, oh, I'm loyal, like I want to go fix this.
Yeah.
But to her, it's like, you just broke my trust. Now I feel like I can't tell you things.
Yeah.
So
if you think about it in like a military standpoint, so that's what typically, if you really get to the root of it, that's the kind of stuff that it applies to, like loyal to this cause, loyal to this country, loyal to this military, that I'm literally willing to die for this situation. And then if I abandon it, therefore I'm not loyal to it. Loyalty in this day and age is not that. And loyalty in friendship is not that. So loyalty is such a massive word. It's usually loyal to a cause, or like I said, an entity. But loyalty for friendship is navigating with the person, your friend's best interests at heart. All right, let's move into number 4. This one is important to me. I mean, they're all important, but this one I see it a lot, and it bothers me, and it makes me feel sorry for people. Number 4 is loyalty is not sacrificing yourself for others, like neglecting yourself or your responsibilities for someone else. Okay, there are times, I just want to cover this before we get into it, there are times that you set yourself aside to help someone else, to, like I said, when it's not convenient. But there's also other times where you press so hard in the interest of someone else that your family suffers, you suffer, your responsibilities suffer. I take that woman that I talked about from work. I would imagine that the time that she on a Saturday is grading papers, she could be spending time with her husband, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Or doing a hobby that she liked or something. So while supporting friends and loved ones is so important, and that is such an important part of life, is being the village for someone else, misconstrued loyalty might lead to someone who continually puts their own needs and their own well-being on the back burner.
Yeah.
And puts someone else's issue or someone else's cause, going back to the cause thing, loyalty to cause, country, entity, whatever, putting that in the front, and then neglecting themselves, which will, I can guarantee you, only be a detriment in their life.
And when we
say,
when we say they're neglecting themselves, that doesn't mean it's like, well, they're not practicing selflessness. And, what that means is, like Danielle said, letting their family fail, letting their marriage fail, so they can pour into other people. It's not just, well, this is inconvenient for me and I'm going to put myself first here. I'm going to prioritize myself, self-care. That's not what that is.
You know how many pastors get burned out because they pour so much into their saints that their family, is affected? They're so loyal to their saints and their people that self-care or family care is neglected. And this doesn't happen all the time. And I'm not thinking of anyone in particular, but that's a really solid example of someone being loyal to their call, which obviously there's a whole spiritual implication in that we're not going to touch. But can we go back to our favorite word, balance? Any sort of SEL, social emotional learning, connectivity, therapy, anytime you're talking about humans, human nature, human actions, you have to go back to the word balance, because loyalty is not neglecting yourself or your response. And neglect is not the same thing as being selfless. Neglect is abandonment, is not abandoning yourself, your family, your identity for a secondary cause. I have to take a mandated reporter training every year. I've had to do it every year since 2017, so I'm very familiar with the process, because everyone in education is a mandated reporter. I think pastors, like clergy, are police officers. So for those of you who don't know, mandated reporting is a obligation to the state that if you see someone in a self-harm, for me it's for kids, if you see that they are being abused physically, emotionally, or sexually, or if they have neglect in their life, you are legally mandated to report it to the state of California. So when I see those kinds of things, and I learn about neglect, and I see the effects of it, I know that it's not just kids who experience neglect, because there's plenty of parents who are so focused on developing their kids and making sure they have everything they need that they sometimes neglect their self and their identity. And we talked with Carissa a few weeks ago in our episode 5, or episode 6 of why your spouse can't be your only friend, and how
Mm-hmm.
friendships outside of your marriage help to prevent personal identity and neglect. And loyalty is not neglecting yourself for someone else.
Yeah.
It's you I don't know how to say it other than it's balance, because you can't go so far into one side, like, oh, my self-care and my blah 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 and whatever, and then also
Mm-hmm.
neglect what you should have some loyalty to: your church, your calling, your family.
Right.
You have to have a little bit of everything in a proper balance.
Balance.
Yeah. The fifth element of what loyalty is not that we're talking about is group think. So in a group setting, many people may misconstrue loyalty by conforming to the group's beliefs or actions, even if they personally disagree. You're going to see this a lot of time in work. Someone's got a promotion on the line, and instead of standing up to the CEO to say, no, I think that's going to take the company in a bad direction, they will line up and be like, yep, I agree, because that's what's expected of them. And that's where you get the idea of like being a yes man, agreeing with someone just because you think that will make you look better in their eyes. You see this in almost every type of entity on the planet. Like, think of an entity, you're going to find some element of groupthink and some element of a yes man in there, because a leader is so easy to, hey, I got all these people who agree with my vision, and who are
Yeah.
not providing a healthy balance to whatever the entity needs.
Right.
Like I said, any entity on the planet is going to have some element of groupthink. So it's going to stifle your individuality, your critical thinking, and potentially be harmful to the entity's long-term goals, because loyalty
Mm-hmm.
to an individual or a group outweighs the loyalty to the cause at hand.
Right. You don't want a friend group or a company or whatever to come crashing, burning down
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't provide your honest feedback.
Yeah, because everyone lined up and said, yes, sir, that's the way to do it. We're going to do it. Like, I mean, what if a general has got a course of action where they can either cross a bridge or cross a desert, but the bridge is rickety? It'll get you there faster, but it's missing bolts, or it's missing or slats in the bridge or whatever. And then all of your lieutenants and captains or whatever are like, the general wants to go across the bridge, and they're like, yes, sir, that's the fastest way. We're going to reach our goal. And then one person's like, but you know what? The desert would be a little bit safer, and we have a higher probability of succeeding if we go this way. Oh, well, this way will be faster. And the general wants to do it. So we're going to line up and do it. And then you start to cross the bridge and you break it, and your entire army drowns. So did your group really succeed if you, by, yes, sir, that's the way we're going to do it? Are you actually being loyal to the cause at hand, or are you being loyal to an individual that is not that's not going to actually achieve
Yeah.
whatever you're like, your friend group or your company or whatever it may be, whatever what your goal is in the long run?
Right. Okay. The sixth thing that loyalty is not, and this kind of falls into the fear of conflict that we were talking about earlier, is ignoring red flags. Because sometimes loyalty can lead people to turn a blind eye to these warning signs and of problematic behavior
Uh-huh.
in their friend or their family, their loved one. And they're like, oh, well, I should always trust them and defend them. Well, don't turn a blind eye to those red flags,
Yeah.
because everything can come crashing down if you let that bottle up.
Mm-hmm. The red flags are not there for you to be like, oh, well, that's just that they're just cut from a different cloth. That's just how they live. No, that's the red flag that's like, hey, you need to help them. That's the banner that's waving that says, hey, I need help, and I need help now. And whatever behaviors I'm exhibiting or whatever issues that I'm facing, that red flag is not for you to be like, oh, ignore. It's for you to jump in and help them, not trust them, not defend them, not excuse their behavior, but help pull them out of the mire that they have found themselves in.
Mm-hmm.
Which actually is, I kind of just jumped ahead, but that's also number 7: enabling destructive behavior. Loyalty is not saying, oh, well, that's their life, just like we talked about earlier, with the woman who found her brother. um you know and like I said at the beginning, we're jumping around because there's so many here, but 6 and 7, ignoring the red flags is not that. Actually ignoring them is enabling their destructive behavior. So you're not having loyalty on two fronts here. Not intervening, not seeking help. That's why people do interventions, right? That's why I've heard of a famous comedian who walked into his apartment and like 10 people were there to have a group intervention for him. Or if you listen to Odyssey, a group intersection to help get him on the right path. You know, they were done enabling him and saying, oh, well, he's famous, he's rich, he can do whatever he wants. No, that's not that's not loyalty to just say, okay, you live what you think is your best life, buddy. I'm just gonna hang back and watch it unfold.
Right.
Helping them, stepping in, because they don't even know that they need help usually.
Right. And if you lean more toward being an avoider like me, it can be so hard sometimes to address those kind of things with your friends, because really, if you have their best interest at heart, then you want to warn them when it's like, hey, people aren't really going to like that. That's not really, an attribute that it's not attractive, and obviously you want to bring those kind of things up with tact and everything. But yeah, you're really doing a disservice to them when you don't bring up those red flags.
That's a really good point, because we've been looking at this kind of in extremes, drug use and whatever destructive behavior, but there's also much smaller, and probably for our listening group, more I have got a hair that keeps falling right in my glasses and I cannot tell where it's coming from. Okay. Anyways, for our listeners, it's probably more, small scale things with their friends, but it's
more relational.
Yeah, it's the same equation, if you will. Like, 2000 plus 2000 is the same as 2 plus 2, the same methodology. It's just bigger numbers. But whether you're in a giant view of highly life-threatening destructive behaviors, or someone who is not presenting themselves in the best light and is not making friends and influencing people because of their smaller but still destructive behaviors, you can jump in, and loyalty is not saying, oh, well, that's just how they are, like they just that's how they talk to people. No, why don't you help them? And if they balk at your help, well, that's a bigger issue in your relationship. But loyalty is not just letting someone, is not, here we go, this is one of my favorite sayings, loyalty is not letting sleeping dogs lie in your friendship. It's not like, oh, well, the dogs are asleep, so therefore, he's suffocating on a plastic bag that's on the ground, but he's sleeping, so I'll let him go. No, you got to wake him up and get him saved. And you got to, loyalty is not just like, well, nothing's stirring over there, so I'm just going to let that just sit. You got to help your friends even when they don't know that they need to be helped.
Right. Yeah.
We are moving into number 8, which is loyalty is not codependency. Some people might misconstrue loyalty as being overly dependent on a friend or partner to the point where they can't function independently. I have seen this so many times. And when I started Friendeavor, I told people, it's like, hey, I'm not an expert. I only know what I know. But you know what? I have eyes and I have ears and I can see people's lives. And I see where codependency is so destructive that they just view it as loyalty. And as a result, they can't function without the other person. They have no personal growth, no personal self-development, no self-sufficiency. And even in a marriage, and I wish we would have brought this up with Carissa when we interviewed her a while back, but it's like, and I mean, go listen to Daring Married Couple. They talk about this stuff all the time. You need your spouse and everything, but you also need your own identity. So loyalty is not, it's not, putting your entire life in someone's hands, because, then you're hindering your own growth.
Yeah. I work for Daring Married Couple, and they're actually covering this topic this week, codependency. They had a follower call in anonymously and ask about codependent in-laws. And so they decided to cover that with a whole podcast episode. Anyway, when I was editing this episode, my sister brought up this story. She was listening to the Dave Ramsey podcast, And this guy had called into the podcast telling Dave Ramsey, yeah, my in-laws are great. Like they bought me a car. He gave me a job, which is that's not bad. He bought me a house. My in-laws bought me a house. And Dave Ramsey was like, whoa, slow down. Like they did that for you because you're not able to buy a house and buy a car right now. And now you're like in debt to your in-laws. You're going to feel the weight of that. And they're enabling your lack of
self-sufficiency.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So
wow.
that was it's funny because we covered that topic this week on DYMC as well.
Because it's so universal. It's not just for marriages.
Yeah.
It's not just for friendships. It's not just for your work. It's not just for your church. It's not for just your parents. It's not just for your kids. It's not just for your sibling. It's for literally anything, because your personal growth and identity and being able to some extent care for yourself. Now, we like to cover both sides here at Friendeavor, so that does not mean that you get to be an island and be like, yeah, I don't need anybody else. I'm just me. And, I don't need anyone else to be, I'm loyal to myself, whatever. No. But you also cannot put your entire identity under the banner of loyalty in someone else, whether that be your in-laws, your parents, your spouse, your whatever.
Right.
Loyalty is not codependency.
Right. And in a multitude of counselors, there's safety. So yeah, while you ought not be overly dependent on someone and involve them in all your decisions, or if it's not your spouse, right, where they weigh so heavily in your decisions, but you should also seek counsel in a multitude of counselors. So don't just depend on one person.
Yeah. Trusted counselors that you, not just someone that's like, oh, well, he's family and he's, he's been around a while, so he clearly knows what he's talking about. See the fruit, check the fruit.
Yeah.
You'll know them by their fruit. Check to see if they're actually producing something that's worth listening to. But yeah, it's you got a village for a reason, but you cannot allow loyalty to become synonymous with codependency.
Right.
Well, I'm glad that us and DYMC are basically the same, in our brilliance. So I'm really glad to know that.
Same wavelength.
But you know what? It actually helps lead us into our 9th one, because it's the opposite in codependency, and we talked about it for a minute, but is isolation. Loyalty is not isolation. In an attempt to be loyal to one person, individuals may isolate themselves from other friends or family members, thinking that they must prioritize one single relationship above all else. So we talked about, I'm an island, I don't need nobody, but you can also wrap yourself up in one friendship. I know I struggled with this when I was younger, because I thought that best friendship was a single person. I've talked about this on the podcast before. Blonde to my brunette, yin to my yang. I thought, because that's how it's viewed in media, books, whatever. It's like, you got to have that one person. And so I spent so much time as a young person zeroing in on one person, saying, okay, this is the person I've chosen to be my best friend. I'm going to be loyal to them, and I'm going to carve out this relationship. And I had it so wrong, because first of all, it doesn't just have to be one person. And second of all, what if that person doesn't feel the same way about you? And so you're pouring all this time, energy, and loyalty into a relationship and isolating yourself from other potential relationships. It's a tier for a reason, people. More than one person can be on that tier. Obviously, the higher you go, the smaller the tiers are, so the less people are going to be there. But isolation goes completely against the friendship pyramid. That would be a friendship oval or circle or something. Like, it's a pyramid rectangle for a reason. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Funny story here. I work at a school. And so, I mean, every day there are just hilarious stories. But just last week, we were dealing with a conflict resolution. There were 3 young girls. And after recess, they all 3 came in crying. And I was like, what is up? And
it's not even funny, but I'm already laughing.
Oh, I know. I wanted her to sit next to me at lunch, but she sat next to the other person. Mind you, they were sitting directly across from each other, but she wanted her to sit next to her. Okay. So she has other best friends now. And I was like, oh my goodness. So one of the girls was older than the other two. And she's sitting there like, you guys, like I can be friends with both of you. I don't, this is really dramatic. Like, and I was like, yeah. I was like, you guys. And so I coached them through that. But it's
Is that
funny
why
because
Karina
we do
played
the
the
same thing
video
as
of the friendship video or the friendship pyramid to teach them that?
yeah, I mean, ooh, in a middle school classroom, you've got all kinds of friendship
Yeah.
drama. So yeah, they benefited from that. But I thought, after that, I was like, this is obviously very dramatized. But we do the same thing as adults, really. We're better at regulating our emotions. We're not going to sit there and cry because they didn't sit next to us.
Mm-hmm.
But I find myself being jealous sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, oh my word, like my friends have been spending a lot of time with so and so doing sleepovers. Why haven't they asked to have a sleepover with me recently?
Uh-huh.
But yeah, loyalty is not isolation.
Yeah. Or you
And there
see
can be
like,
multiple people in that tier.
yeah, you see like a bunch of people who would be, from your good tier, uh your good friend tier of the pyramid having a party or something, and you're like, I didn't I didn't get an invite to that. Like, why was I
Mm-hmm.
excluded? It was more than likely nothing personal. But
Yeah.
if you spend all your time focusing, isolating yourself on that one instance and misconstruing that as them being disloyal to you, you're setting yourself up for issues. And like you said, you can regulate your emotions as an adult, but you got to be able to work through instances of like, oh, bummer, and be able to realize that I don't have to be invited to every single thing that they do,
Right.
because that would be isolating myself into only what they want to do. Like, if
Mm-hmm.
you blocked out your entire calendar so that one person would have access to it all the time, is like, you're isolating, or they're isolating, whoever's doing the blocking, from potential other events or whatever, because you're like, oh, what if they ask me to go
Yeah.
get coffee? I got to be available for them. I did that when I was younger. Like, oh, and
Totally. Yeah.
it's often viewed as an OBO, like, oh, I got a better offer this time. I have a whole
Mm-hmm.
philosophy on OBOs, by the way, which I can get a soapbox on later. But
I would love to hear it. Love.
basically what it boils down to is, don't isolate yourself from other relationships in the name of loyalty. And don't let someone do that for you either. If you see someone like cutting themselves off from other people in pursuing you in a friendship or whatever, that's not healthy either. Because
Yeah.
even though you didn't mean to, their attention on you is not, I want to be careful here, because it's not that it's not healthy, but they clearly need help understanding how to make friends with more than one person, right? You don't have
Right.
to go and isolate yourself on a journey of pursuing one person to be your friend, like I did, thinking that my best friend had to be one person, and cut yourself off from other potential relationships on the way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Number 10, our last one, we're about to wrap up here for the evening or the morning or the afternoon or whenever you're listening to this. It could be you're on a plane and you're going from one time zone to another, but wherever you are, we are recording in
Ooh,
the evening.
should be me.
Should be me. We are kind of looping back to number 4. Number 4 was sacrificing self for others while neglecting self and responsibilities. And we're going to double down on that with number 10. Loyalty is not having loyalty to a fault. Okay. Like, you'll hear
Mm-hmm.
people say, oh, they're loyal to a fault. Like, people may mistakenly believe that loyalty means never walking away from a toxic or abusive relationship. It also goes with the isolation one. This is kind of like the peak at the mountain or the top of the hill, and it just kind of overarchingly covers everything on both sides. Everything that we talked about to this point. You got continued harm and unhappiness, and like we said, number 4, neglect of yourself, of your responsibilities, just to make yourself more appealing as an individual for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Loyal to a fault, the fault is the emphasis. Think of what a fault is, and we've already touched on it, so you don't have to think back too far. But neglecting yourself, neglecting your other relationships, if you're a wife and you spend all your time supporting some event or something, and you haven't seen your husband in 3 days because you're getting home while he's going to bed, and you're getting up and he's going to work or whatever. And again, I'm not the person to speak on marriage issues, but just as a two-person relationship like example, you're neglecting that time that you could be spending with him because of your loyalty to a fault, to something else. And I get it. There's seasons and there's jobs and there's events and stuff like that. And I'm not pointing out anything in particular, but I'm just saying, if this is a constant pattern in your life, whether it's with your kids or with your friends, like I said, we're a friendship podcast, loyalty to a fault will have just destructive influences the more it takes over your life. Well, that wraps up our loyalty episode and what it means to friendship. When Kayla was talking about someone calling in, an anonymous caller, it reminded me, hey people, you got a question, you got a comment, you got a thought, please email us at friendeavorpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. We are not fancy. We don't have a phone number for you to call yet, but you know what? A good old-fashioned email works anytime. So please, if you want to know more about the podcast, why we started it, you got thoughts, you got opinions, you disagree, you agree, shoot us an email. We'd love to hear from you.
We really value your feedback, and we want to produce content that is actually relatable and helpful and what you're looking for. So we don't want to just ramble for no reason. So please reach out with questions or concerns.
And if you really want to make us smile, go ahead and drop a rating on this podcast, which is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars, PLEASE. Next week we are talking about the challenges of long distance friendships. So send a copy of this link to your friend across the country. Say hint, hint. Next week we're talking about long distance friends. Also, just share the podcast with a pal, because everyone needs a little bit of friendship in their life. Thank you so much for stopping by this week. We will see you next week on Friendeavor the podcast.
See you guys.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Friendeavor the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you enjoyed today's content, leave a review and share with a friend. You can find the show notes on our website, www.friendeavor.net, and in the description of this episode.
Friendship is a journey. It's an endeavor. We'll see you next time on Friendeavor.